How's it going, people? Jack here, and I'm sick. Yeah, I've been standing in one too many of FromSoft's poison swamps to the point where the debuff has yet to worn off, and whenever this infection that I have goes away, it can't get here too soon. But before the delirium sets in, I wanted to talk a little bit about Souls-like, more specifically the Elden Ring DLC. Because, as it always happens, whenever FromSoft release something new, whether it being a main title or a DLC, it always ends up sparking a little bit of controversy, with a bunch of questions being asked like, why is it not Bloodborne 2? Will it have a grappling hook mechanic, because that is now a selling point for so many games today?
Shooter with dynamic cooperative gameplay including a grappling hook mechanic.
Will it run above 60 FPS? Will the game be too hard? Or the one thing that is actually warranted questioning, will the game be optimized on release? Those are definitely some questions to ask, but I am going to focus on the second to last one there, on the difficulties. Because as it stands right now, the Elden Ring DLC is pretty damn good. I've been having a blast playing it, and I'm saying this as somebody who has spent damn near a day having his thorax severely murdered at every single point by not just bosses but even normal NPCs. Yes, it's not always sunny in the land of shadows. I guess that one way of saying that it is objectively good is by looking at the Metacritic scores of Shadow of the Erdtree, which is currently sitting at a 95, which is pretty damn nice, something that warranted it being called the highest rated DLC of all time, which has now dethroned the Blood and Wine DLC of The Witcher 3 from 2016, and that thing was beautiful. Like, it's yet another one of those games that truly feels like a passion work that the developers truly put a lot of effort into, making a great, massive world with a bunch of good content that quite literally could be a game of its own. Now, it's important to know that the Metacritic score here is focusing on the PS5 version of the game, whereas as soon as we start looking at something like Steam, the positive response is not so unanimous anymore, as people have been voicing some concerns with things that are reasonable and some that are rather silly. One that I always will laugh on is performance issues, which is something that when I was streaming the game last week, I had people in chat asking whether or not they were watching it at a lower resolution because of the constant frame drop that was happening. I would experience some input lag and even a single crash. So checking it out online, I found out that I was not the only one experiencing these issues, so to some degree I felt a little bit vindicated. That being said, that is of course not the end of the world. It is likely something that already has been fixed with the patch note. But you know, these are things that end up affecting your first-hand impression of the game, and if it gets patched a bit too late, those faults are already formed. So, performance, I think, is a fair thing to complain about. Another one is something that was raised by Silicon Era about how rewarding, or lack thereof, some of the bosses end up being. Like, you could struggle to something for quite some time and the reward that you get is not adequate to the amount of effort that is put into it. And that I will have to agree, because while I have zero issues with struggling with bosses, because that's what the Souls-like are all about, building up the tension and releasing it adequately in a way that feels satisfying when you finally murder the lion that you've been spending like too many tries doing.
Yes! Fucking hell! Yeah. About time. About time. Oh god, that was so stupid.
Oh, trust me, it felt incredibly satisfying taking out that damn thing after like 25 tries. But for other sub-bosses or NPCs roaming the world, when you're rewarded with a smithing stone, not so much. But then we move into the realm of criticism that I consider to be a little bit silly, at least to a certain degree, with outlets such as Forbes or even Eurogamer who wrote, "This feels like difficulty for difficulty's sakes, turned up to 11, perhaps because with the added expectations of a DLC having something extra absurd to conquer, even though it technically doesn't require finishing the core game." To which I'm like, yeah, that is kind of the point. As we all know, game difficulties only came to being with the sudden manifestation of our Lord and Savior Miyazaki of Ghibli Studios when he made My Invader Totoro. There's so many things wrong with that sentence. That must be the delirium setting in. But Souls games had been historically hard. That's why it somewhat felt like an exclusive club, and one that only in recent years has been made accessible for the masses. That's why they felt to a certain degree as if they were gatekept behind two famous words: get good. Yet still we had people beating those games on a Dance Dance Revolution setup. Like, yeah, the games were hard, but they got good. And to be fair, one did not even need to do that. Hold on, I'm feeling a little bit dizzy here. Don't mind the laugh on my face and the suave and smooth talking here. I'm actually in a great amount of pain, so I'm going to sit down for this one. See, one could make a case that previous Souls-like were only as difficult as you wanted them to be. With the linear design and like semi-open hub world, you could always go forth or even backtrack to a certain level to always acquire new gear, new loot, items that would facilitate your progression. But it is that very nature that sets Elden Ring apart, because we are not talking about anything semi here. We are talking about full-fledged freedom for you to tackle the game as you see fit. Like, take the example of what happens when you take that very first lift in the beginning of the game and gaze for the very first time upon Limgrave. You get to talk to this white person who tells you that you have no bitches, and the sights of grates indicate where you might want to go. But then there is the sentinel that you face that is going to teach you a valuable lesson. Power through conflict, or go do something else. It is something that the game's design itself speaks volumes about. Like, you thread the path from Limgrave, you make it to Stormvale Castle where you have to deliver Godric's his lasagna. But wait, you don't even need to do that, because there's a whole not so secret path that you can take that helps you circumvent the first legacy dungeon in the game. Make it to Leonia of the Lakes and then you get to gaze on Raya Lucaria, which is literally framed in the center of the damn thing. How do you get there? Well, you steal a key from a sleeping dragon. You bust into the school, kill some student, kill Mozilla Firefox, and of course Renala and her children. We're doing some fantastically heinous acts in Elden Ring, but to be fair, those kids are kind of creepy. And then, if you want to make it to the capital to face Morgoth, you have to get to Caelid as well as Limgrave to get some items and just take that lift back there. Like, getting halfway to the main game only required that you beat 3 bosses or at least get access to 3 great runes, which could be achieved rather easily depending on what tactics you wanted to employ, such things as climbing through Mount Gelmir. What a thrill! Where lies a weapon literally designed for you to use to slay Satan. And I know that I'm focusing a little bit on the exploration part of the game right now, but this directly also translates to damage output and combat, as exploring will help you amass a greater number of runes, help you level up fast, access never seen before weapons and spirit summons that are definitely going to be useful, and overall will just provide you with a, in my opinion, better experience. And the same thing goes with the DLC, as when we're talking about specifically damage output. Notice how the NPCs literally tell you to find those crosses in the beginning of the game? Well, whenever you find one of those, you get some of those shadow fragments that literally can end up doubling the damage output and damage negation that you have. This is the game kind of indirectly telling you that this might be a thing that you want to do to facilitate your gameplay, and it is literally something that I think Miyazaki pointed out in a Japanese interview, which I think was transcribed on everybody's favorite site, Reddit, that said the following: as for Miyazaki's system level up, elements limited to DLC has been added. I think it's easy to understand if you imagine something like offensive power in Sekiro's Shadow Dies Twice. But apart from the conventional levels, there is offensive power that is only effective in the DLC. This was prepared for the freedom to challenge threats that I mentioned earlier, and it allows you to say things like, this boss is tough, so let's explore another area and try again after becoming stronger. This makes it easier to experience even at high levels. And this is where like these points of contention tend to happen, right? Because we have like news outlets like Eurogamer who were complaining about the difficulty, while at the same time saying that it feels weird to constantly have like indicators telling you that you should be hitting the spot that is glowing or doing this and that. constant notification of what to do when they're literally there to help you facilitate your gameplay. But one thing would be to have games journalists complaining about such things, which we always have issues with game journalists. Another thing would be influencers voicing what is their opinion but making it like the norm that everybody should be applying. Yes, it's fine that you find the DLC to be difficult and that you cannot move forward, and perhaps you might need some help, but that is not indicative of the game decisively being bad. Because at the end of the day, what can truly facilitate your gameplay is how deep you want to interact with it. Like a little bit of a perspective here from another game that was mired in some controversy but way different. This one had to do with microtransactions. I'm of course talking about Dragon's Dogma 2. Now, this game doesn't give a shit about you. It really does not care. Like, I've beaten this game 3 times already, and the amount of people who made it to the true ending is not much. Does that have anything to do with the fact that there are way fewer content creators who are religiously following this game, covering every single quest and interactions that you can have with NPCs? Definitely. But that is also something that urges you to try to understand what a game is about. In the same light that Elden Ring does it, you actually need to go and interact with NPCs, have conversation with them if they are available. Try to actually listen carefully to the thing that they're asking you for in order to initiate quests. Like literally, some of the best vocations, which are these games classes, are hidden behind simple interactions with people. And some of course are way more difficult than that, like the Wayfarer that asks you to literally give furry booze to an alcoholic. I'm not making that up. Things that are supposed to make the game more fun were actually hidden there for people who wanted to explore the game extensively. So yeah, thinking that the DLC is hard is not an issue, but saying that it's too damn hard and people should not be playing it and that it's a bad game, I don't think is correct. And mind you, I'm not saying any of this thing to be like a pompous asshole and just be negative. That is not my intention here. Like for example, there are some bosses whose animations do not fit the hitboxes that we are usually used for and are quite literally doing what can only be considered as being straight up bullshit. Yes. Take the example of Hog Rider over here. He's a dick. So, at the end of the day, what I'm trying to say is that obviously a lot of our opinions on certain video games can be very subjective. We can find some games that are considered to be 10 out of 10 by many that turned out to be extremely boring, whereas some 3 out of 10s that are mechanically subpar can provide us a hell of a lot of fun. But often portraying those opinions as being objective when faced with especially the actual design that the developers intended can tend to poison the well. Poison the soul? I don't know, I just wanted to make yet another Souls meme. Anybody can enjoy these games to a certain degree, and if you are not finding something fun currently, it is fine to take a step back and come back to the game later. However, the tactic of just muscling through a boss and thinking that that is going to provide you the fun that you inevitably don't end up having might not be the right one to apply here. Perhaps going off the beaten path and try to explore might help you a little bit. Use those spirit ashes, use those summons, and for God's sakes, do make use of the crafting mechanics. Well, depending on how well this turns out, I might actually over-edit this video. I did have plans of putting myself somewhere in Limgrave, like the first church that you encounter, where you literally receive your first smithing kit. Please, do make use of those items. They are very useful. I'm willing to bet that 90% of players have not crafted a single tool. Don't shy away from using them. They are there for a reason. That being said though, these have been my opinions on the Elden Ring situation, and as I imagine by the time that I get to edit this, the score would have been back up, because obviously it is kind of a little bit of a silly thing. But nonetheless, I thought that it was a thing that was worth sharing some ideas about. But that being said, wish you all to have a wonderful day. Hopefully you like this video, subscribe if you want to see some more, and see you guys in the next one. I'm gonna go and wallow in some pain.